He was an innovative director. And he told me things about him and Elvis, some of it I couldn't even get in the film, that are so important. Like there's a moment he told me when he was sitting with, I mean, there's so much more snow jobbing going on in the comeback special alone, where the Colonel turns up. I was telling Peter, okay, turns up and he's already got every Christmas song, right? And lined up, what will be said, everything. He invites the young guys into the thing, into the wackadoo kind of, he's got a carny sort of tent like Orly House on the Paramount lot. He goes, oh yeah, you know, and you know, he did so many like tricks, and he said, well guys, now it's going to be this one, and Elvis wants you to be involved, isn't that great? And some of your innovative ideas are going, now you just do these numbers and have a lot of, oh by the way, I'm going to make you members of the Snowman's League. Haha. And anyway, you do that, have a good time, and have a lot of fun. Like seriously, they walked down and went, I think we got to quit, right? And then Elvis, I mean, just that alone, I couldn't put in the movie. So Steve wrote to me tonight, and he'd seen it with his family. He's not that well, and the things he said in that about, like, just Austin, nailing it, just somehow, exactly what you said, compressing it all in, because like even in the comeback special, like the special has all of these other great bits in it, and I used the device of the fever dream of the Colonel to allow it to turn a bit into a sort of morphine trip, so I could throw the kung fu and all the other bits in a sort of blur, right? Because it's a compression device. Now, what your real question is about is how do you, look, this is a funny story, I mustn't go on, but very quickly, we are in Graceland, and lovely Olivia de Jong, who's Australian, we're sitting in the jungle room, and we've just had a barbecue. We've been invited by the Presleys to have a real barbecue in Graceland. So how surreal is this? You know, the second most visited house in America, next to the White House, is Graceland. Like, it's a museum. And we're having a barbecue, and there's a band, and we go in the jungle room, and we're having drinks, and the younger kids are downstairs playing pool, you know, it's like a house, you know. And Olivia comes up and says, Baz, you know, this is like the jungle room. And I go, yeah, no, it is the jungle room. And she goes, not that jungle room, the one that we did the scene where Elvis is singing in the ghetto, and I come down the stairs up over there, I mean, the set of the jungle room. I said, yeah. And she goes, wouldn't that be great if it could be in the film? I said, yes. It's a beautiful scene, but what it did was, it was a sidestep, because in the end, it's like the Hollywood period. I really had to comp that down. There's so much delicious stories, but in the end, what is the story of the Hollywood period in serving the larger arc of the relationship between Colonel and Elvis? It's pretty simple. I promised him that he would become the biggest star in the world. He was. He was the highest paid actor in Hollywood. They made a river of money. They got to a point whereby they didn't even have to, hey, I got a great idea, Elvis. You don't even have to record new songs. We'll just string a song. They were making them in 2 weeks. Fantastic, we're making so much money. Elvis is in a bubble. Would I like to have included the time when Elvis heard the head of the studio say, I think it was Beckett with Peter O'Toole, he said, was going to get an Oscar. He said, oh yeah, that's why we make all those silly Elvis films, so that now and then we could occasionally afford to make a Beckett for Oscar. And when Elvis read that, it killed him, stabbed him through the heart. And when he says at the end of this movie, I'm almost 40 and I've never done anything I ever remember. I've never made that important film. That line was told to me verbatim by Priscilla. So I have to kill babies every single day to serve the greater arc. So I guess that's the answer. And it's not easy, but you have to.
Yeah, wow. Edward Anhalt won an Academy Award for writing that. He also wrote an Elvis movie. So
which one?
Blue Hawaii, I believe.
You see, that was the early ones were quite good. But we agree about one thing. If you see Kid Creole, right? First of all, that was for James Dean, that film. And second of all, that's a damn good film. Yeah. It's directed by the same director who did Casablanca, and Elvis is good in that. You know, and he really, I mean, you know, think if Sinatra went on to have a really good acting career and singing. It killed him. It absolutely killed him. And you know what? There's a great story where, I am rabbiting on, aren't I? But
no,
just
very
quickly.
I love it.
There's a great story where a guy comes, the Colonel says, the Colonel's like talking in the 80s, 80-year-old, he goes, he's talking to take out, well, can I tell you, this producer guy came to me and he says, you know, I mean, Tom does, because I've heard it, the Colonel's voice. The Colonel's a giant character. He had about 12 voices on tape. He changed his voice to anyone he was with. He goes, and this guy comes to me and says, we've got a role, and I can guarantee you, Elvis is going to win an Academy Award, but we can't pay the $1 million because Elvis was the highest paid actor in Hollywood. And I said to him, well, that's okay. Don't worry. You give us the $1 million, and then he'll do the film. And then when he gets the Academy Award, we'll give you the $1 million back. And guess what? He never come back to me, right? That's how the Colonel operated. He operated with wackadoo kind of clever. Last one, Lieber and Stoller. Elvis says, never worked. I have to do every song from now on with those two young kids, Lieber and Stoller. The Colonel sent Lieber and Stoller a piece of white paper with a line on it and said, hey, great news, Elvis wants to work with you. I'm working out the contract, sign that and send it back. Never heard from him again. Isolate. Yeah.
All right, who else has a question here? I can't see all the, right there you are. Now, she's going to walk down the stairs here and hand over a mic so we can hear you. So, take a couple of seconds here. Pass that mic right down here. All right, go.
I wish I had something more profound, but I just wonder, prior to GAIL approaching you, Baz, what was your interest and knowledge of Elvis? And you too, GAIL, were you a lifelong fan? Did you know anything about him, or just kind of the Vegas phase?
Well, Gail, you go first.
I was a fan. I watched every one of his movies 50 times. I didn't think they were bad. I thought they were great. That's thanks to the $1 Million movie, which is what I grew up on when I lived in Long Island, and that's how I grew up. I loved his movies. I thought he was super handsome, and I didn't think about doing anything with him until Mark went over to Core Media, and I looked up, what does Core Media own? Because I'm a producer, that's what I do. And, but you just couldn't call him and say, hey, Elvis, like, I want to do something with Elvis. So we had to actually think, what should we do with him? And there were, as I said earlier, there's only one idea. The grandeur of this guy, the beauty of the costumes and the beauty of the man, who could capture that, and who could capture the time, and it was him. It was him, and I knew it, and I knew it would come to be. It was weird, but I did.
Yeah, there were a lot of times because I wasn't easy on Gail. I mean, because she came to me and I talked 3 hours. And then I'm working on this Chinese film. I was in and I was out because I couldn't find the total in. Okay, what I told you conceptually was the film, but I wasn't sure why it had relevance, and then the world changed. My experience, I grew up in a tiny country town, like smaller than Tupelo, Mississippi, like 5 houses, but we had a gas station, we had a farm, and for a while we ran the local cinema. So I had my sort of cinema paradiso moment, Dad getting out, because Dad was in the Vietnam War, he knew how to thread a projector. And so he's running the changeover and all that, tins turning up with, Lawrence of Arabia or Hello Dolly. But the matinee was an Elvis movie. It was an Elvis movie. And I'm with you, Gail. I mean, it was probably Easy Come, Easy Go, a really horrendous movie, right? But I just thought it was the coolest guy in the world. It was like a masterpiece. I think if you see those films, you understand why my movies look like they do, right? So there was that. Then later on, I just actually remembered the thing, I told you this the other day. I remembered one thing, which is quickly, but we went to a school of 3 rooms in a school, and it was a Catholic church, and I remember some reason thinking pink socks, Elvis, and I wore pink socks to the church. And these really tough dudes, they're tougher boys, got me up against the wall and like, listen, you fairy, what are you wearing those pink socks for? Do you mean you? And they got me against the wall like, fair, only a fairy wears pink socks, mate. That's the thing about scary Aussies, they get funnier, not scarier. Pink socks, only fairies wear them, mate. Like that, I'm absolutely terrified. I must have been like 10. And all of a sudden, what are you doing? And it's Peter Dunn. And he is the toughest, coolest guy in the school. And he goes, Yeah, this fairy here, little fairy Luhrmann's wearing the pink socks. Right? I'm joking to death, you know. And he goes like, oh yeah? Elvis wore pink socks. And they just scrammed like that, you know. And I'm like, yes, Elvis. So, but I lost the fanhood fairly early. Like I went under Bowie and all of that, but he was always present. You said it. He's never not been present.
No.
Under 35, he might be present either as a Halloween costume or in Lilo or Stitch, you know, or over that, it's the movies or the songs, whatever. But you can try how hard as you like, but you can't get rid of him out of the American psyche.
No.
And that therein lies, my friends, I think the journey we all went on, is how do you take that fact and use it in a way in which we can not only talk about then, but now.
I remember exactly where I was when Elvis died. You know, there's very few people like that, but I could tell you exactly where I was. And probably a few people here could too. Does anybody else have a question? Let me see. Over there. Yeah, right on this side. Who's got the mic over here?
I can just say it without the mic. I wanted to ask you, Austin, so how did you learn?
Hang on. She's going to run up here and give you the mic because they can't hear in the back.
I wanted to ask you, how did you learn to move like him? Did you have a movement coach or a choreographer? Or did you just study him, profusely? And it must come instinctually somehow or something. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, yeah, so I had many moments where I thought, what am I getting myself into? Because I've always been a wallflower. I never danced at a party. I was never a dancer or a singer. I would sing for, somebody very close to me, but other than that. So I ended up having all these moments. I did have an incredible movement coach named Polly Bennett, who I found, I read this article about her working with Rami Malek. And it was all about working from the inside out, not the external things. And because it's a really tricky thing when, especially in those moments, as Baz called them, train spotter moments, where you want it to be identical to the real thing. So something like Hound Dog on Milton Berle. But if you just are focusing on the external things of the positioning of his hand or the angle of his head, then you get caught in this external thing and it feels like it doesn't feel alive. So it was this constant balance of finding the inner and then honoring and really getting incredibly meticulous about those external things, but it always coming from the inside. So I had many moments. Thankfully I had a year and a half to prepare. So I tried everything. We did animal work, we did tap dancing, swing dancing. We studied a lot of, it was a lot of watching the people that Elvis would be seeing, down on Beale Street. So looking at a lot of Little Richard's movements and seeing a passion on Howlin' Wolf's face and trying to imagine what was Elvis seeing rather than just looking at Elvis himself. Because then you start seeing these keys in and then you're able to be inspired by Little Richard in the way that Elvis was, or whatever those moments were. And I had many moments of epiphany. Baz and I took a road trip from Nashville to Memphis, and my first time that I ever went to Graceland. And we, at one point, we recorded all the gospel stuff that is in the gospel tent. So I got to be in the center we were in this little church that was built in the 1800s with 30 of the most incredible gospel singers. And I got to stand in the center of them as they sang. But it wasn't just singing, it was stomping feet. And Shannon, who was leading the congregation that day, he said, somebody close to him was in the process of passing away. And he said, I need to sing right now. I need to wail right now. Because when I get out, this person very close to me may not be alive. He said, and I know all of you have something to wail about. So everybody starts just wailing these songs out. And I had this moment where the chills just went down my back, and I'm stomping my feet with them, and we all have tears in our eyes, and I started to feel the rapture of music. And there was an epiphany about what dancing actually is. Because Elvis he didn't have choreography. He was being moved by the music. So for me, then I knew anytime that I wasn't feeling the feeling I was feeling in that church that day, I was off. And so I had moments, I mean, during Hound Dog, I remember the first time I did it, I was incredibly nervous, there's an audience, and it wasn't dialed in. And then I had this moment where suddenly then I felt the click. And moments like that, you know, it was touching back into why do you move? What instrument is moving which part of your body and that sort of thing. Yeah, so that was sort of my process.
All right. Yes. That's someone else too. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, go ahead. We're gonna get a mic to you. Boy, she's getting a workout here. Okay.
Thank you for making this movie. Making any movie is very difficult, and it took a long time to get this one on the screen. So I wanted to ask, especially the producers, how do you keep your motivation? How do you keep your spirit high when everything around you says no all the time? No, it's too big, no, it's too small, no, it's COVID, no, it's this and that. And yeah, I'm very curious to know how that experience went through.
Well, I think I can say on this movie specifically, I think we continue to draw constant inspiration from one another, because, as you said, making a movie at any time is a very difficult undertaking. But to make this movie, as we did against the backdrop of COVID, I mean, there were many times when it was not certain that the movie would be able to go ahead. But I think, for example, when we had to go on a COVID hiatus, we were a couple of days out from principal photography, so it was devastating. And very quickly, GAIL was back here in Los Angeles, our colleague Patrick McCormick was in New York, Baz and Catherine and I were in Australia, and we were just in constant communication with each other, just kind of tending that flame to make sure that the movie never felt like it was out of reach or not going to happen. But it wasn't just the producers. I mean, I think the ultimate example setter was Austin himself, who, when we went on that hiatus, rather than returning home to California, he remained in Australia with us, just to be in this like a coiled spring, in this sort of heightened state of readiness for willing the movie back into being. And I think for us, it was really just, we encouraged each other and kept one another's faith constantly until where we are today.
All right. Yes. Right over here. Yeah. Hi. We're going to get a mic to you. So, right here, you can just pass it down the row. Okay. And there you go. Go ahead.
Such a lovely, lovely, sweet girl. Susan Fritz, everyone.
Yes.
One of the
She's
things
great.
that I really liked about this film has to do with the timing of where we are today, especially here in America, and to show Elvis and his upbringing with the African American community, and how it influenced his life throughout the film. It didn't just this is one off. You showed it at times when he was young, you showed it when he was older, and then even when he got older, he had that with him the whole time. Whether it was Mahalia Jackson or Little Richard, as you said, B.B. King. What made you keep that through line throughout the film?
I'm so very glad you asked that. We've been doing some talks like this since Cannes, and when we were in Graceland, the great strength, and I was making a joke about Susan Fritz, but the whole Warner team that she represents made the very strong decision to bring a lot of people there. And that was good because it meant actors like Yola, who plays Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who invented rock and roll and was queer in the 50s. I mean, go figure, right? Or having Alton Mason playing Little Richard, or the wonderful Kelvin Harrison Jr. playing B.B. King. Now, I can answer this question in this way. It wasn't I thought, gee, we should keep that in. No black music, no Elvis. Yeah. No relationship to the black community. I mean, that growing up in that one of the White Houses in the black community, I did the research. It was 5 years ago. I started at Graceland researching. I was going for 2 years. I had a great research team, so I'm Sam Bromell and I. But I also went out there and I met people. And I met a gentleman who died sadly last year called Sam Bell. And he's in the movie. Because he's that little boy that says, come on, let's run down to the juke joint and the gospel tent. And the gospel recording that Austin was talking about, when Elvis goes in and is having the epiphany in that tent, and the preacher grabs him, Shannon grabs him and says, leave him, he is with the Spirit. Sam told me that story verbatim. I put it in verbatim. Now, if Yola was here, because she's so articulate, she would say that there's a very big difference between appropriation, which is you take something and you go like, I invented it and I came out of a vacuum, and really a celebration, but also you have to know the DNA connection. I mean, if you're talking about America in the 50s to 60s to 70s and now, you can't talk without dealing with the issue of race. And Elvis is right in the middle of it, for the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, it is really true. I didn't make up. You talk to B.B. King, or when I spoke to Sam, I said, Sam, so tell me, because I'm the ultimate outsider, when Elvis in the 50s, you're kids, you're now teenagers, Elvis is on the radio, he's singing songs from, Sam said, well, we were just shocked. He said, like, in a good way, like, you white kids might listen to music on WDI, which is a black radio station, but they couldn't buy records. And he said the fact he was singing it, I mean, it was like, and suddenly, Little Richard said, because Elvis covered my song, I suddenly was getting sales. So he was jumping the race line. I didn't make it up that he went to the fair on colored night. He was breaking the segregation laws. I mean, they wanted to kill him. That's true. So that's the punk. But then the Colonel removes him from that and goes, you know what? Black culture, not good for business. Let's make him a nice family actor in Hollywood. Seals him up. And you see when he goes back to the special with Binder, he goes, I want to do gospel. Because I tell you one thing, and it's a longer subject. But as the ultimate outsider, I learned a lot about Elvis, and a great iconic music friend of mine said, like, oh, but is he really that interesting? And I went like, I don't know. Let me find out. The more I peeled away, was there a subtle hint as to who that was? Anyway, he can still dance really well. But he was more and more interesting beyond my belief, because what I really discovered was, whatever his love was, his greatest love was gospel. And even towards the end of his life, when he looked like he did at the end of the movie, he'd do 2 shows a day at that golden cage that he was trapped in because the Colonel kept him there where he was caught in a trap and he couldn't get out. And he'd do 2 shows, he'd get the Sweet Inspirations up, and they would sing gospel till 6 in the morning until the sun came up. And one of them had a child called Whitney Houston. So, they were pretty good singers. Like, his love of gospel, I think, made him an extraordinarily spiritual person. And so, to answer your question, I do not believe you could tell Elvis' story without showing the DNA lineage of where his influences came from. Yes, he also loved country music. Yes, he put those influences together. But the relationship with him and BB, do the research. I mean, Kelvin didn't want to do the role. He went like, oh, I don't know, I heard this and that about it. Did the research and came back and said, my God, they had a real friendship and they both loved music. And they talk about how music can't be owned by anyone. So I just thought it was one of the largest motivations for me doing this. That's why. Awesome.
Well, thank you for that question. Thank you all for coming out tonight.